The Image and the Reality. Why Accurate Representation Matters. Written by James H. Cone. The human mind relies heavily on visuals. We form understanding and perceptions based on what we see. This is especially true when it comes to figures we revere, figures like Jesus. Accurate representation matters because it shapes our understanding of the divine and influences how we interact with the world. When the image is false, it distorts our perception of the truth. A fabricated face, unmasking the European Jesus. The pervasive image of Jesus as a fair-skinned, blue-eyed European man is a historical fabrication. This image did not emerge organically from descriptions in the Bible. Instead, it was crafted centuries later by European artists during a time of intense colonialism and imperial expansion. They projected their own image onto Jesus, aligning him with their notions of power and beauty. This depiction served a political purpose. It reinforced the supposed superiority of Europeans, placing them closer to the divine. It justified their conquest and subjugation of non-European peoples who were deemed different and inferior. The divine prohibition, God's command against idols. The Bible is clear in its condemnation of idol worship. The very first commandment declares, "You shall have no other gods before me." Exodus 20, verse 3. The second commandment builds upon this, stating, "You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven, above or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below." Exodus 20, verse 4. These commandments are not arbitrary rules. They strike at the heart of faith, emphasizing that God is beyond human comprehension and cannot be contained in any physical form. Idolatry, then, is not just about worshipping statues. It is about attributing divine power to anything created by human hands, including fabricated images. A false image, a broken commandment, European Jesus as idol. The European depiction of Jesus, while not a physical statue, functions as an idol. This image has been elevated to a position of worship, shaping the way millions perceive and relate to Jesus. It replaces the true Jesus, the historical Jesus, with a fabricated image that serves a specific agenda. This image becomes a tool of division, separating those who fit the European ideal from those who do not. It creates a false hierarchy, placing whiteness at the pinnacle of creation and relegating others to a lower status. The connection between the false image of Jesus and the rise of racism is undeniable. This fabricated image provided a religious justification for the enslavement of Africans, the colonization of indigenous lands, and the systematic oppression of people of color. By depicting Jesus as European, colonizers were able to claim a divine mandate for their actions. They argued that they were bringing Christianity and civilization to the heathens, who were portrayed as inherently inferior and in need of saving. The Slave Bible, a distorted version of the Bible used during the transatlantic slave trade, exemplifies how the European Jesus was weaponized to maintain white supremacy. This version of the Bible omitted passages that emphasized liberation and justice, while highlighting verses that promoted obedience and subservience. Slaves were taught that their suffering was divinely ordained and that resisting their masters was a sin against God. This manipulation of Scripture highlights the danger of using a fabricated image of Jesus to justify oppression and control. Obedience and subversion, biblical texts and the distortion of authority. Throughout history, those in power have twisted biblical verses to maintain their authority and justify their actions. One such example is the often cited verse from Ephesians chapter 6, verse 5, "Slaves, obey your earthly masters with respect and fear, and with sincerity of heart, just as you would obey Christ." This verse, taken out of context and stripped of its historical nuance, was used to enforce the institution of slavery. It ignored the broader message of the Bible, which emphasizes love, compassion, and justice for all people, regardless of their social standing. Satan's deceptive game, idolatry as a tool of division and destruction. The Bible identifies Satan as the father of lies, John chapter 8, verse 44, who seeks to deceive and destroy. One of his most effective tactics is the use of idolatry. By tempting humans to worship false images, Satan diverts their attention from the true God and fosters division among them. The European Jesus, as an idol, serves Satan's agenda perfectly. It creates a false sense of superiority for some while justifying the oppression and dehumanization of others. It distorts the message of love and unity at the heart of the Christian faith, replacing it with hatred, fear, and division. Breaking the chains, dismantling idolatry to combat racism. To combat racism, we must first dismantle the idols that perpetuate it. We must reject the false image of the European Jesus and embrace the true Jesus, the historical Jesus, who was a brown-skinned Middle Eastern Jew. This requires a critical examination of our own biases and preconceived notions. It demands that we decolonize our minds and hearts, challenging the ingrained narratives that uphold white supremacy. Conclusion: embracing truth, embracing justice. The struggle against racism is inextricably linked to the fight against idolatry. When we reject false images and embrace the truth of God's love for all people, we create a more just and equitable world. Let us tear down the idols of racism and embrace the liberating message of the gospel, a message that calls us to love our neighbors as ourselves and to fight for justice for all.